The desert heat pressed against the windows of Morrison Associates like an unwelcome visitor. Inside the conference room, the air conditioning hummed steadily, but it couldn't cool the tension that had settled over the mahogany table. I smoothed my skirt for the third time, a nervous habit I'd picked up somewhere between dropping Tommy off at school and driving downtown to hear how little my grandmother thought of me. The room smelled of fresh coffee and expensive leather, nothing like the cinnamon and fabric softener that always clung to Grandma Rosa's house. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Across the polished table sat my older brother Michael, looking every inch the successful restaurant owner in his navy blazer and gold watch. His wife Jennifer perched beside him, her manicured fingers drumming silently against her Hermès purse. She kept glancing at the abstract painting on the wall like she was already redecorating the space in her mind. My parents flanked them like bookends, Mom clutching her tissue box with the determined grip of someone expecting tears, and Dad checking his phone every 30 seconds as if the stock market might crash while we were reading about casseroles and china sets. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, casting zebra stripes across Robert Chen's weathered face. He'd been Grandma Rosa's attorney for over 20 years, long enough to know exactly how she liked her coffee, black with 2 sugars, and how she felt about people who showed up late to important things. His silver hair caught the light as he arranged the papers in front of him with the precision of someone who'd delivered both good news and heartbreak in equal measure. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders, though the room wasn't cold. It was the same green cardigan I'd worn to every important event since college graduation, the one that made me feel invisible in the best possible way. Sometimes being overlooked was a blessing, sometimes it meant people didn't expect much from you, which made it easier to navigate disappointment. Michael stretched back in his chair, the leather creaking under his confidence. He'd driven here in his BMW, the one with the dealer plates still in the back window because he couldn't decide between keeping it or upgrading to something newer. Success had made him comfortable with taking up space, with assuming things would go his way. Mom had spent the drive over talking about expansion plans for the restaurant chain, about how Michael had such vision, such natural business sense, how Grandma Rosa would be so proud to see her legacy in capable hands. Nobody had asked me what I thought Grandma Rosa would want. Nobody had asked me much of anything lately. Jennifer whispered something to Michael, and he nodded, straightening his tie. She had that particular smile people wear when they're mentally spending money they don't have yet. I'd seen it before, at family dinners when they talked about the new house, the vacation to Europe, the private school they wanted for their future children. It wasn't malicious, exactly, just the natural confidence of people who'd never doubted they deserved good things. Robert cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the morning stillness like a starting bell. He opened the folder in front of him, and I caught a glimpse of Grandma Rosa's handwriting on the top page, those careful loops and precise crosses that had filled birthday cards and grocery lists for as long as I could remember. She'd written everything by hand, even in her 80s, claiming computers made people lazy and impersonal. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time that felt both too fast and impossibly slow. Outside, Phoenix was coming to life with the familiar rhythm of rush hour traffic and construction sounds. Inside, we sat suspended in the strange formality of endings, waiting to hear how a woman who'd measured flour by feel and seasoned by instinct had decided to divide up the pieces of her life. I thought about Tommy, probably sitting in his 3rd-grade classroom by now, doodling spaceships in the margins of his math worksheet. He'd asked me this morning why everyone was so serious about Grandma Rosa's will, and I'd struggled to explain inheritance to an 8-year-old without admitting that some people got everything while others got forgotten. He'd nodded solemnly and hugged me extra tight before running toward the school doors, his backpack bouncing against his small frame. Mom reached over and patted Michael's hand, the same gesture she'd used when he was nervous about baseball tryouts or college interviews. She'd always been his cheerleader, ready with encouragement and backup plans and connections that might help. With me, she offered practical advice about budgeting and not expecting too much from life. The difference was subtle but consistent, like background music you don't notice until it stops. Robert adjusted his glasses and looked at each of us in turn, his expression carefully neutral. He'd probably sat through hundreds of these meetings, watching families discover whether love and money traveled in the same direction. His office walls were lined with certificates and family photos, evidence of a long career spent helping people navigate the messy intersection of grief and inheritance. The restaurant business had been Grandma Rosa's pride, built from nothing after she arrived from Guadalajara with 2 suitcases and determination that could move mountains. She'd started with a food cart, selling tamales and fresh tortillas to construction workers and office employees. Dad used to tell stories about helping her prep vegetables at 4 in the morning, about the way she'd taste each batch of salsa and adjust the seasoning by memory rather than recipe. By the time Michael graduated college, Rosa's Kitchen had become Rosa's Restaurants, 3 locations scattered across the valley with plans for more. She'd handed him the keys to the flagship location on his 25th birthday, along with a speech about responsibility and family legacy that had made Mom cry happy tears. I'd been there, working the register during my spring break, watching him accept the role that everyone knew had been waiting for him since childhood. Jennifer shifted in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her legs in that restless way that meant she had opinions she was keeping to herself. She joined the family 5 years ago with a business degree and ideas about modernizing operations, updating the decor, maybe franchising if the numbers worked out. Grandma Rosa had listened politely and continued doing things exactly as she always had, which created an interesting dynamic at family gatherings. I found myself staring at the empty chair at the head of the table, the one where Grandma Rosa would have sat if this were a regular family meeting instead of the formal dissolution of her earthly concerns. She'd favored high-backed chairs that made her feel tall, claiming that looking people in the eye was half of any successful negotiation. Even at 82, she'd commanded attention without raising her voice, a skill I'd never quite mastered. The waiting felt heavier now, thick with the weight of assumptions and expectations that had been building for years. Michael would get the restaurants, obviously. The house in Ahwatukee would probably go to Mom and Dad, or maybe to Michael and Jennifer as they started thinking about children. There might be small bequests for the grandchildren, maybe a piece of jewelry, or a cherished photograph for the daughters-in-law. For me, there would likely be something sentimental but inexpensive, a gesture that acknowledged my existence without suggesting I needed or deserved substantial support. A book of recipes, perhaps, or her collection of vintage buttons from the sewing room, something that said she remembered I existed without admitting I mattered in any practical sense. Robert opened the will with practiced efficiency, his fingers finding the right pages without hesitation.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The morning light had shifted, casting new shadows across the conference table and highlighting the dust motes that danced in the air between us. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang and went unanswered, adding to the sense that we were suspended outside normal time, waiting for the words that would rearrange our understanding of family. Michael leaned forward slightly, his businessman's instincts engaged. He'd probably been running numbers in his head all morning, calculating expansion costs and mortgage payments against whatever inheritance might be coming his way. Jennifer's drumming fingers had stilled, and she watched Robert with the focused attention of someone who understood that words on paper could change everything. Mom clutched Dad's arm, and he patted her hand absently while checking his watch. They'd been married 34 years, long enough to communicate in glances and sighs, long enough to know each other's worries without discussion. Right now, they were probably thinking about retirement plans and whether Michael's inheritance would be enough to secure the family legacy they'd helped build. I closed my eyes for just a moment and tried to channel some of Grandma Rosa's calm certainty. She'd faced immigration officials and loan officers and health inspectors with the same steady dignity, never apologizing for taking up space or asking for what she needed. If she were here now, she'd tell us to sit up straight and listen carefully, because important things deserved our full attention. When I opened my eyes, Robert was watching me with something that might have been sympathy or might have been professional concern. He'd known our family long enough to understand the dynamics, to see how love got distributed and redistributed according to unspoken rules about potential and need and traditional expectations. The papers rustled as he turned to the first page of the actual will, past the legal preliminaries, and into the heart of Rosa Elena Rodriguez's final decisions about money and property, and the complex mathematics of family affection. This was it, the moment when speculation would give way to reality, when we'd all learn exactly how much we'd meant to a woman who'd never been particularly good at saying such things out loud. The weight of tradition and expectation had been validated through legal documentation, confirming that merit and preparation were rewarded with opportunity and responsibility. Michael's inheritance represented both achievement and obligation, the recognition of his capabilities, combined with the expectation that he would maintain and expand what had been entrusted to his care. As Robert approached the final sections of Michael's bequest, detailing the specific bank account numbers and investment portfolio transfers, the morning sun reached its peak intensity, flooding the conference room with the kind of bright, clean light that made everything seem possible. Michael's face had settled into an expression of quiet satisfaction, mixed with dawning comprehension of the enormous responsibility now resting on his shoulders. Jennifer's fingers had stopped their restless drumming entirely, her hands now folded calmly in her lap as she processed the magnitude of what they'd just inherited. Her business mind was clearly working through implementation strategies, probably calculating renovation budgets and expansion timelines, mentally reorganizing their entire life around the reality of restaurant ownership. The specific dollar amounts Robert read aloud were impressive enough to make Dad whistle softly under his breath, despite his efforts to maintain appropriate decorum. Rosa had been even more successful than most of the family realized, her modest lifestyle masking the true extent of her business acumen and investment savvy. The numbers represented not just money, but decades of 7-day work weeks and careful reinvestment of profits. Mom had given up all pretense of controlling her emotions, tears flowing freely as she watched her son receive validation of everything she'd believed about his potential. She was probably remembering all the early mornings, when she'd driven teenage Michael to the restaurant for opening shifts, all the family dinners where Rosa had talked him through business decisions and customer relations strategies. Robert's voice carried a note of genuine warmth as he read Rosa's personal message to Michael, words she'd dictated specifically for inclusion in the will. Her voice seemed to echo through the formal legal language, expressing pride in his dedication and confidence in his ability to honor the family legacy while adapting to changing times and opportunities. The personal message referenced specific memories and shared experiences, moments from Michael's childhood and young adulthood that had convinced Rosa of his suitability as her successor. She mentioned his patience with difficult customers, his willingness to work extra hours during busy periods, his respectful treatment of longtime employees who'd helped build the business from its humble beginnings. Jennifer wiped away a tear of her own, as Rosa's words acknowledged her contribution to Michael's success and welcomed her officially into the family business. The message recognized her education and professional insights, while expressing hope that she would help Michael maintain the personal touch and community connections that had always distinguished Rosa's restaurants from larger corporate competitors. The formal reading of Michael's inheritance concluded with provisions for business continuity during the transition period, ensuring that operations would continue smoothly while legal transfers were completed and new management structures were established. Rosa had anticipated potential disruptions and created safeguards to protect both family interests and employee security during the changeover process. Robert closed that section of the will and paused briefly, allowing the magnitude of Michael's inheritance to settle fully in everyone's minds. The silence stretched just long enough for the reality to sink in completely, for the family to absorb the transformation that had just occurred in their financial circumstances and future prospects. Outside the conference room, Phoenix continued its normal rhythm of business and commerce, unaware that inside one small legal office, a family's entire economic foundation had just shifted dramatically. The restaurants that had become familiar fixtures in the local dining landscape now belonged to a new generation, carrying forward traditions while opening possibilities for innovation and growth. Michael's transformation from employee to owner was complete in legal terms, though the practical implications would take months or years to fully realize. He was no longer working for his grandmother's vision, but carrying responsibility for his own interpretation of family legacy, balancing respect for established traditions with opportunities for modernization and expansion. Jennifer's role had similarly transformed, from supportive spouse to business partner with legitimate authority, to influence strategic decisions and operational improvements. Her consulting background and fresh perspective would now be applied directly to family enterprises, bringing professional expertise to organizations that had previously relied primarily on experience and intuition. The weight of expectation that had been building throughout Michael's adult life had finally materialized into concrete responsibility and opportunity. Rosa's confidence in his abilities was now backed by legal documentation and financial resources, providing both validation and enormous pressure to prove worthy of such comprehensive trust. Mom's pride was mixed with recognition that her role in Michael's life was changing as well, from primary supporter and advocate to secondary advisor, as he assumed full adult responsibility for major business operations. She would always be his mother, but he was now definitively his own man with his own enterprises to manage and decisions to make. Dad's satisfaction reflected his understanding that the family's economic security was now assured for another generation, his own retirement plans supported by the knowledge that successful business operations would continue under competent management. His years of contributing to Rosa's success had helped create the foundation that would now support his son's continued achievements. Robert organized the papers related to Michael's inheritance into a separate folder, the documentation that would be needed for legal transfers and banking arrangements. The complexity of business ownership required multiple forms and regulatory filings, a process that would take several weeks to complete but would result in Michael's name replacing Rosa's on all relevant documents and accounts. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from anticipation to satisfaction and relief, the major questions answered, and the family hierarchy confirmed through Rosa's careful planning and generous provision for her chosen successor. Michael's inheritance exceeded even optimistic expectations, providing not just current assets, but ongoing income potential that could support comfortable lifestyles for years to come. Jennifer's strategic mind was already working through immediate priorities and longer-term opportunities, her business training engaged with the practical challenges of assuming control over established operations while maintaining customer loyalty and employee satisfaction. She understood that successful transitions required careful attention to both financial management and human relationships. The morning had advanced significantly, and other appointments were probably waiting in Robert's schedule, but the reading continued with the methodical pace that legal documents demanded. Rosa's will was comprehensive and detailed, addressing not just major bequests, but numerous smaller provisions that reflected her careful attention to everyone who'd played roles in her life and business success. Michael's inheritance was complete and generous, confirming his status as the primary beneficiary of Rosa's lifetime of work and saving. The restaurants, the house, the investments, and the ongoing business operations would all transfer to his control, providing both immediate assets and future income potential that exceeded anything he dared hope for during the nervous anticipation of the morning's reading. Robert turned to the next section of the will, and the family's attention shifted toward the remaining provisions that would address other relatives and charitable organizations. The major bequest was complete, but Rosa's thorough planning had included acknowledgments for everyone who'd contributed to her success or earned her affection through years of relationship and support. The validation of Michael's inheritance represented more than just financial transfer, it was confirmation of family values and recognition of merit-based succession that honored both tradition and practical capability. Rosa had chosen her heir based on demonstrated competence and commitment, ensuring that her life's work would continue under leadership she trusted completely. Jennifer's tears had been replaced by the focused expression she wore during business meetings, her mind clearly engaged with strategic planning and implementation challenges. She was no longer just Michael's supportive spouse, but his business partner with legitimate authority and responsibility for decisions that would shape their family's future for decades to come. Part 3. The unexpected turn. Robert's fingers traced down to a new section of the will, his practiced eyes scanning ahead briefly before continuing his steady recitation. The formal language shifted slightly, taking on a more personal tone that suggested Rosa had dictated this portion directly, rather than relying entirely on legal templates. Her voice seemed to emerge through the carefully chosen words, carrying the same directness she'd used when explaining cooking techniques or business principles. The conference room had settled into a comfortable rhythm, the major suspense resolved and everyone's expectations confirmed through Michael's comprehensive inheritance. Mom had stopped reaching for tissues quite so frequently, her emotional equilibrium restored by the validation of everything she'd believed about her son's worthiness and potential. Dad's phone had remained untouched for several minutes, a sign that even his habitual multitasking couldn't compete with the satisfaction of witnessing family success. Jennifer's posture had relaxed into something approaching casual elegance, her business training still engaged but no longer tense with uncertainty about outcomes. She was probably already mentally scheduling meetings with restaurant managers and key suppliers, beginning the strategic planning that would guide their transition from employees to owners of a successful multi-location operation. Michael's smile had become more natural, less careful, as the reality of his inheritance settled into something approaching comfortable acceptance. The weight of responsibility was still there, but balanced now by genuine excitement about the opportunities that complete business ownership would provide. His years of preparation and gradual assumption of management duties had been building toward this moment of official recognition and authority. The morning light continued streaming through the conference room windows, carrying with it the promise of another perfect Phoenix spring day. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, but inside Robert's office, time seemed suspended in the formal ceremony of transferring one life's achievements to the next generation. Rosa's careful planning was evident in every provision, each bequest reflecting her understanding of family dynamics and individual needs. Robert cleared his throat softly before beginning the next section, his voice carrying a subtle change in inflection that suggested something different was coming. The legal language remained formal, but there was an undercurrent of personal warmth that hadn't been present during the business-focused portions of Michael's inheritance. This felt more intimate, more reflective of Rosa's individual relationships, rather than her strategic planning for institutional continuity. The first of these smaller bequests addressed Rosa's collection of jewelry, pieces she'd accumulated over decades of modest prosperity and careful saving. Her wedding ring, and the delicate gold chain she'd worn to church every Sunday, would go to Mom, along with the pearl earrings that had been Rosa's own mother's contribution to her wedding day ensemble decades earlier in Guadalajara. Mom's hand moved instinctively to her throat, where she often wore her own simple necklace during important occasions. The jewelry bequest was more than monetary value, it was connection to family history and cultural tradition, tangible links to women who'd faced their own challenges with grace and determination. Rosa's recognition of these connections through her will demonstrated her understanding of how memories and relationships survived through physical objects. Dad would receive Rosa's collection of business books and industry publications, volumes she'd studied carefully during the early years of restaurant development, when she'd educated herself about American business practices and regulatory requirements. The books represented her intellectual curiosity and commitment to continuous learning, qualities that had contributed significantly to her success, beyond natural intuition and cultural knowledge about food preparation. These personal bequests reflected Rosa's attention to individual interests and capabilities, her recognition that different family members had contributed in different ways to her success and happiness. The gifts were thoughtful rather than valuable, chosen for their personal significance rather than their market worth, demonstrating her understanding that the most meaningful inheritances often couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Robert continued reading through provisions for Rosa's household furnishings and personal effects, items that carried emotional weight far exceeding their monetary value. The kitchen table where she'd conducted business meetings and family discussions would go to Michael and Jennifer, along with her recipe collection, and the well-seasoned cast iron pans that had traveled with her from Mexico and served in every restaurant kitchen since the food cart days. Jennifer's expression softened as she considered the significance of inheriting Rosa's cooking equipment and recipes, tangible connections to the culinary traditions that had built their family's success. She understood that these items represented more than kitchen tools, they were symbols of cultural heritage and business foundation, links to the knowledge and techniques that had created their prosperity. The reading continued with provisions for Rosa's extensive library, books in both Spanish and English, that reflected her lifelong commitment to education and cultural preservation. The volumes would be donated to the local community college's multicultural studies program, ensuring that other students could benefit from the resources Rosa had used to educate herself about business, history, and American culture. This charitable bequest reflected Rosa's understanding that education had been crucial to her success, her recognition that knowledge and opportunity should be shared rather than hoarded. The library donation would create a lasting memorial to her values, while providing practical benefits to future generations of students pursuing their own paths toward prosperity and integration. Robert's voice carried increasing warmth as he read Rosa's personal messages accompanying each bequest, her explanations for why specific items were going to particular recipients. These weren't just distributions of property, but carefully considered expressions of relationship and recognition, demonstrations of her attention to individual personalities and contributions over the years. The detailed personal messages revealed Rosa's keen observation of family dynamics and individual characteristics, her understanding of what each person valued most highly in their relationship with her. She'd been paying attention during family gatherings and business meetings, noting preferences and interests that now informed her thoughtful approach to distributing cherished possessions. Mom's inheritance included not just jewelry, but also Rosa's collection of family photographs, images documenting decades of celebrations, business milestones, and everyday moments that had accumulated into a comprehensive visual history of their shared experiences. The photographs would allow Mom to become the family historian, preserving memories and stories for future generations who might not have direct connections to Rosa's experiences. Dad's business books came with handwritten notes Rosa had added over the years, her thoughts and observations about management techniques, customer service strategies, and operational improvements. These annotations transformed the volumes from general reference materials into personalized guides that reflected Rosa's specific experiences and insights about building successful enterprises in competitive markets. The kitchen equipment bequest included Rosa's handwritten explanations of proper care and usage, instructions that would help Jennifer maintain the tools while understanding their historical significance and cultural importance.
These weren't just pans and utensils, but links to culinary traditions that had sustained families through generations of change and adaptation. Robert paused briefly to organize his papers, the slight delay creating space for everyone to absorb the personal nature of these smaller bequests. Rosa's attention to individual relationships was evident in every provision, her recognition that meaningful inheritance involved more than financial transfers but required acknowledgement of shared history and emotional connections. The morning was advancing, and the conference room had grown slightly warmer, despite the steady air conditioning. Outside, Phoenix was reaching the comfortable temperatures that made spring the city's most pleasant season, but inside Robert's office, the focus remained entirely on Rose's careful distribution of both material possessions and intangible legacy. Michael's expression had grown more thoughtful as he listened to the personal bequests, his understanding of Rose's character deepening through her attention to details and relationships. She hadn't just been a successful businesswoman but a careful observer of human nature, someone who understood that lasting influence came through personal connection rather than purely financial achievement. Jennifer's appreciation for Rose's planning was evident in her increasingly relaxed posture, her recognition that they'd been welcomed into a family that valued both success and personal relationships. The inheritance represented not just business assets but inclusion in a network of traditions, responsibilities, and connections that would shape their lives for years to come. Robert turned to another section of the will, his movements deliberate and respectful as he handled documents that represented Rose's final communications with people who'd mattered to her. The legal formality couldn't entirely mask the personal nature of these provisions, Rose's voice emerging through carefully chosen words and thoughtful explanations. The charitable bequests continued with donations to organizations that had supported Rosa during her early years in Phoenix when she'd been learning English and navigating unfamiliar business regulations. The Immigrant Services Center that had provided translation assistance and legal guidance would receive funding for their continuing work with new arrivals facing similar challenges. This donation reflected Rosa's understanding that her success had been supported by community institutions and individual helpers, people who'd provided assistance without expecting repayment, but who deserved recognition for their contributions to her achievements. The bequest would allow current immigrants to access services that had been crucial to Rosa's own integration and business development. The local food bank where Rosa had volunteered during holiday seasons would receive both monetary donations and ongoing commitments from Rosa's restaurants to provide prepared meals during community events and emergency distributions. This provision demonstrated her understanding that business success carried social responsibilities, obligations to support community welfare through both individual charity and corporate citizenship. Robert's reading revealed the comprehensive nature of Rosa's community involvement, her participation in organizations and causes that had enriched Phoenix's cultural landscape while supporting vulnerable populations. Her bequests acknowledged these connections while ensuring that her contributions would continue beyond her individual involvement. The Immigrant Services donation came with specific provisions for scholarships supporting English language education and business development courses, programs that had been crucial to Rosa's own success but which faced ongoing funding challenges. Her bequest would create sustainable support for services that helped newcomers develop skills needed for economic integration and personal prosperity. These charitable provisions reflected Rosa's sophisticated understanding of community development and social responsibility, her recognition that individual success was connected to broader social welfare and cultural enrichment. Her donations were strategic rather than merely generous, designed to address root causes of challenges she'd experienced personally during her own immigration and business development. Mom's emotional response to the charitable bequests was evident in her renewed tears, her recognition that Rosa had been contributing to community welfare in ways the family hadn't fully understood or appreciated. The donations revealed hidden dimensions of Rosa's character, aspects of her values and commitments that had been expressed through action rather than conversation. Dad's approval of the charitable provisions was visible in his nodding and occasional quiet comments, his understanding of community obligation and social responsibility aligning with Rosa's demonstrated commitments. He'd probably been aware of her volunteer activities but hadn't realized the extent of her financial contributions to causes she supported quietly without seeking recognition or praise. Michael's respect for Rosa's community involvement was evident in his increasingly serious expression, his growing understanding that inheriting her business meant assuming not just profitable operations but social responsibilities that came with economic success and community prominence. The restaurants weren't just commercial enterprises but community institutions with obligations to support local welfare. Jennifer's business training helped her appreciate the strategic nature of Rosa's charitable giving, her understanding that community support created goodwill and customer loyalty while addressing genuine social needs. The donations represented sound business practice as well as personal values, investments in community relationships that would benefit restaurant operations while serving worthy causes. The reading continued with provisions for Rosa's church, the parish where she'd attended Mass regularly for over 3 decades and where she'd participated in social activities, fundraising events, and community service projects. The bequest would support ongoing maintenance of the building while funding programs that served elderly parishioners and immigrant families. This religious bequest reflected Rosa's spiritual life and her understanding of faith as active engagement with community welfare rather than purely personal belief. Her church involvement had provided both spiritual comfort and opportunities for service, connections that had enriched her life while allowing her to contribute to causes she considered important and meaningful. Robert's voice carried special warmth as he read Rosa's personal message to her parish community, her gratitude for decades of spiritual support and fellowship during both challenging and prosperous times. She acknowledged specific individuals who'd become friends and supporters, people who'd enriched her life through shared faith and common commitment to community service. The church bequest included provisions for maintaining the Spanish-language Mass that had been important to Rosa and other immigrant families, ensuring that cultural and linguistic traditions would continue even as community demographics changed over time. This provision demonstrated her concern for preserving connections to cultural heritage while supporting successful integration into broader American society. These religious and cultural provisions revealed Rosa's sophisticated understanding of identity and community, her recognition that successful immigration required both adaptation to new circumstances and preservation of meaningful traditions from countries and cultures of origin. Her bequest supported institutions that helped maintain this delicate balance between change and continuity. The morning was progressing steadily, and Robert's reading was moving through the comprehensive provisions Rosa had created for distributing both material possessions and ongoing commitments. Her planning was thorough and thoughtful, reflecting months of consideration and consultation about how best to honor relationships while supporting causes she considered important. Michael's inheritance remained the centerpiece of Rosa's will, but these additional provisions revealed the broader context of her values and commitments, the network of relationships and obligations that had shaped her understanding of success and responsibility. The business assets came with implicit expectations about continued community involvement and social responsibility. Jennifer's appreciation for Rosa's comprehensive planning was evident in her attentive listening and occasional note-taking, her recognition that they were inheriting not just business operations but community relationships and social obligations that would shape their role as business owners and community members. The personal bequests and charitable donations painted a picture of Rosa as someone who'd understood success as encompassing more than financial achievement, someone who'd used prosperity as a platform for community service and cultural preservation while maintaining strong personal relationships with family members and close friends. Part 4. The shocking revelation. Robert turned to what appeared to be the final section of Rosa's will, his fingers finding a page that seemed different from the others, slightly heavier paper with handwriting that looked more recent than the typed legal text. His eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly as he scanned the contents, a reaction so subtle that only someone watching carefully would have noticed the brief pause in his professional composure. The atmosphere in the conference room had settled into comfortable satisfaction, everyone processing the generous and thoughtful distributions that had confirmed Rosa's care for both family members and community causes. Michael was already mentally organizing his transition into business ownership, while Jennifer was probably calculating renovation budgets and expansion possibilities. Mom and Dad were sharing quiet smiles of pride and relief, their faith in Michael's worthiness validated through Rosa's comprehensive trust. I had been sitting quietly throughout the reading, my own expectations confirmed through my absence from any significant provisions. The small personal bequests had gone to others, the charitable donations reflected Rosa's values, and the major inheritance had transferred exactly as everyone anticipated. My role in this ceremony was simply to witness the family's good fortune, to add my presence to the formal occasion without expecting recognition or consideration. The morning sun had reached its peak intensity, flooding the conference room with bright, clean light that made the mahogany table gleam and cast sharp shadows from the window blinds across Robert's papers. Outside, Phoenix was experiencing another perfect spring day, with temperatures that invited outdoor activities and clear skies that promised afternoon warmth without the oppressive heat that would arrive with summer. Robert's voice took on a slightly different tone as he began reading from the handwritten edition, words that Rosa had apparently added to her will during a recent revision session. The language was less formal than the earlier sections, more personal and direct, carrying the distinctive cadence of her speaking voice rather than the careful precision of legal documentation. "There is one final matter," Robert read, his voice carrying Rosa's words with careful attention to her intended emphasis, "that requires special attention and timing. My granddaughter Sarah has always been present when presence mattered most, quiet when others needed space to shine, generous when generosity went unnoticed and unacknowledged." The words hung in the air like unexpected music, creating a moment of surprised attention that shifted the room's focus away from comfortable conclusions toward something unforeseen. I felt my heart rate increase slightly, not from expectation but from the unusual experience of being mentioned at all in Rosa's final communications. Her acknowledgement felt both warming and bewildering, recognition I hadn't anticipated and wasn't sure how to interpret. Michael's expression showed polite attention but no particular concern, the mention of his sister fitting comfortably within the framework of family acknowledgement that had characterized the smaller bequests throughout the reading. Jennifer maintained her composed professional demeanor, probably assuming this was leading toward some modest personal gift or sentimental token that would complete the will's comprehensive distribution of Rosa's possessions and obligations. Mom's tissues returned to active duty as she prepared for what she assumed would be another touching personal message, perhaps accompanied by some cherished item from Rosa's household that would provide comfort and connection to cherished memories. Dad's attention sharpened slightly, his business experience suggesting that unexpected additions to legal documents often carried significance beyond their apparent simplicity. Robert continued reading Rosa's handwritten words, his voice carrying increasing warmth as her message developed beyond simple acknowledgement toward something approaching explanation and justification. "Sarah has raised her son Tommy with grace and strength that reminded me daily of my own journey as a young mother facing uncertainty with determination and hope." The mention of Tommy created a small stir of interest, family members glancing toward each other with mild curiosity about why Rosa would address my parenting in her final legal communications. Tommy was beloved by everyone, his cheerful presence at family gatherings always welcome, but his inclusion in Rosa's will seemed unexpected and slightly puzzling given the focus on business assets and charitable distributions. "I have watched Sarah work multiple jobs while attending evening classes, building a future for herself and her son without complaint or requests for family assistance. Her independence has been both admirable and heartbreaking, reflecting strength that should have been supported rather than simply applauded from a distance." These words created the first moment of real discomfort in the room, Rosa's gentle criticism of family dynamics introducing tension that hadn't existed during the straightforward distribution of assets and charitable bequests. The observation about support versus applause carried implications that made everyone shift slightly in their chairs, recognizing truth that was difficult to acknowledge directly. I found myself staring at the table, processing Rosa's words and their implications for my understanding of family relationships and expectations. Her recognition of my struggles felt simultaneously validating and embarrassing, acknowledgement of challenges I'd tried to handle privately without burdening others with requests for assistance or expressions of need. Michael's expression had grown more serious as he processed Rosa's comments about family support, his business training helping him recognize that unexpected elements in legal documents often preceded significant revelations. Jennifer's note-taking had resumed, her instincts suggesting that this personal commentary might be building toward provisions that would require attention and possibly action. Robert turned to a new page, this one containing what appeared to be a sealed envelope attached to the will with official legal tape and notarization marks. His movements became more deliberate as he prepared to open the envelope, clearly following specific instructions Rosa had provided for this portion of the reading. Rosa provided particular instructions for this final section, Robert explained, his professional demeanor returning as he addressed the family directly rather than simply reading from prepared text. She requested that this envelope be opened only during the formal reading, in the presence of all family members with specific attention to timing and dramatic effect. The phrase dramatic effect created a ripple of nervous laughter from Jennifer, though her business training was clearly engaged with the implications of sealed documents and special instructions. Michael leaned forward slightly, his curiosity engaged despite his satisfaction with his own comprehensive inheritance. Mom and Dad exchanged glances that suggested shared uncertainty about what additional surprises Rosa might have planned. Robert carefully opened the envelope, removing several pages of handwritten text along with what appeared to be legal documents that had been prepared separately from the main will. His eyes scanned the contents quickly before returning to the beginning, his professional composure maintained despite what must have been surprising revelations about family secrets and hidden arrangements. The conference room had grown completely silent except for the steady hum of air conditioning and distant traffic sounds from the street below. Everyone's attention was focused entirely on Robert's preparations, the morning's comfortable conclusions replaced by anticipation of unknown revelations that Rosa had planned as her final surprise. The contents of this sealed section, Robert began, address circumstances that Rosa felt required confidential handling until this moment. She specifically requested that these revelations be shared during the formal reading to ensure complete family understanding of her decisions and their underlying reasoning. I felt a growing sense of unease, not from expectation of personal benefit but from concern about what family secrets Rosa might have decided to reveal through her legal communications. Her mention of Tommy and my parenting had seemed oddly specific, and the dramatic presentation suggested information that would surprise or possibly disturb family dynamics that had seemed stable and predictable. Robert's voice took on increased gravity as he began reading from Rosa's sealed instructions, words that she'd apparently composed with careful attention to impact and timing. The language was more direct than her earlier personal messages, carrying the authority of someone revealing truth that had been protected through years of discretion and careful silence. Tommy Martinez is not just my great-grandson through marriage and family connection, Robert read, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. He is my direct biological great-grandson, the son of my grandson Carlos Rodriguez, who died in military service before he knew of his son's existence. The words hit the conference room like a physical blow, creating stunned silence that stretched beyond comfort into genuine shock. I felt the blood drain from my face as I processed the implications of Rosa's revelation, understanding suddenly why she'd been so particularly attentive to Tommy during family gatherings, why her interest in his education and development had seemed unusually intense and personal. Michael's composed expression cracked completely, his mouth falling slightly open as he struggled to process information that transformed his understanding of family history and relationships. Carlos had been Rosa's oldest grandson, 5 years older than Michael, who died in Afghanistan when Tommy was barely 2 years old. The family had mourned his loss while never knowing about his connection to my son. Jennifer's note-taking had stopped entirely, her pen frozen above the paper as she stared at Robert in disbelief. Her business training provided no framework for processing revelations that redefined family structures and inheritance expectations through hidden biological connections that had remained secret for years. Mom's tissues became inadequate for the flood of tears that followed Rosa's revelation, her understanding of family history and relationships completely overturned by information that explained so much about Rosa's particular attention to Tommy's needs and development. Dad's phone remained forgotten as he struggled to reconcile this new information with his memories of Carlos and his assumptions about family connections. Robert continued reading despite the family's obvious shock, following Rosa's instructions to complete the revelation regardless of emotional reactions or requests for clarification. The legal requirements demanded full disclosure of all provisions and explanations, creating a formal framework for sharing information that transformed everyone's understanding of inheritance rights and family obligations. I have kept this secret to protect Sarah from expectations and pressures that might have complicated her relationship with our family. Rosa's words continued through Robert's steady recitation. Tommy deserves to know his heritage and receive his rightful inheritance as Carlos' son and my direct descendant. The implications of Tommy's biological connection to Carlos and Rosa were staggering in their legal and financial significance. As Carlos' son, Tommy would be entitled to inheritance rights that superseded the arrangements Rosa had made for other family members. The restaurants, the property, the investments that had been designated for Michael might now require redistribution according to traditional inheritance laws and family hierarchies. Michael's face had gone pale as he processed the potential impact on his own inheritance, the business ownership he'd been planning and anticipating suddenly thrown into question by the revelation of a direct heir who'd been unknown and unacknowledged. Jennifer's strategic mind was clearly working through the legal implications, her understanding of inheritance law suggesting that biological descendants typically held stronger claims than collateral relatives. Robert's reading continued with Rosa's explanation of the legal arrangements she'd created to address Tommy's inheritance rights while maintaining family stability and business continuity. Her planning had been even more sophisticated than anyone realized, encompassing not just current family members but hidden connections that required careful legal maneuvering to protect all interests involved. I have established a separate trust fund for Tommy's education and future needs, Robert read, to be administered by Sarah until he reaches majority age. This trust is funded independently of the main estate to ensure that other family members' inheritances remain intact while Tommy receives appropriate support as Carlos' son and my great-grandson. The relief that crossed Michael's face was visible and immediate, his understanding that his own inheritance remained secure, allowing him to process the emotional implications of Tommy's true identity without fearing financial catastrophe. Jennifer's posture relaxed slightly as she realized that Rosa's planning had anticipated and addressed the potential conflicts that such revelations might create within family dynamics. Mom's tears had transitioned from shock to something approaching joy as she processed the reality that Tommy was not just a beloved step-great-grandson but a true family member whose connection to Carlos created new bonds of relationship and obligation. Dad's expression showed similar emotional complexity, grief for Carlos mixed with happiness about Tommy's true place in family history and inheritance rights. The trust fund Rosa had created for Tommy was substantial without being overwhelming, sufficient to ensure his educational opportunities and future security while maintaining proportional relationships with other family inheritance. Her planning had been meticulous in balancing competing interests and emotional needs, protecting both Tommy's rights and family harmony through careful legal structuring and financial provision. Robert explained the administrative arrangements Rosa had created for Tommy's trust, provisions that would allow me to manage his inheritance with professional oversight and legal protection. The responsibilities were significant but manageable, requiring attention to educational planning and long-term financial strategy while ensuring that Tommy understood his heritage and family connections as he matured. The revelation about Tommy's parentage explained so many small mysteries that had accumulated over the years: Rosa's particular interest in his development, her insistence on paying for certain educational expenses, her careful attention to his behavior and achievement during family gatherings. Her secret knowledge had shaped her interactions with both Tommy and me in ways that now seemed obvious in retrospect. Michael's recovery from his initial shock was evident in his growing smile as he processed the joy of discovering that Tommy was truly his nephew rather than simply a family connection through marriage. The revelation created new bonds of relationship and responsibility, transforming casual affection into genuine family obligation and love that would enrich everyone's lives. Jennifer's business mind was already engaging with the implications of Tommy's inheritance for family dynamics and restaurant operations. Her strategic thinking suggested opportunities for Tommy's future involvement in business operations, educational pathways that might prepare him for eventual participation in family enterprises while honoring both Carlos' memory and Rosa's intentions. The morning had transformed from routine legal procedure into life-changing revelation, Rosa's careful planning creating surprises that would reshape family understanding and relationships for years to come. Her decision to reveal Tommy's true parentage through her will demonstrated sophisticated understanding of timing and emotional impact, ensuring that important information was shared when family members were prepared to receive and process it appropriately. Robert's reading was approaching completion, the final provisions addressing practical matters of trust administration and legal oversight that would ensure Tommy's inheritance was managed properly while he was still a minor. Rosa's attention to detail extended even to these administrative arrangements, protecting Tommy's interests while providing clear guidance for family members who would be involved in his continued upbringing and education. The conference room had grown warmer during the extended reading, afternoon heat beginning to challenge the air conditioning system, but nobody seemed aware of physical discomfort as they processed the emotional and practical implications of Rosa's revelations. The morning that had begun with comfortable expectations had become a journey into family secrets and hidden connections that transformed everyone's understanding of relationships and obligations. As Robert concluded his reading of Rosa's final provisions and sealed revelations, the silence that followed was filled with processing and emotional adjustment rather than the comfortable satisfaction that had characterized earlier portions of the will reading. Rosa's planning had been masterful in its complexity and consideration, addressing not just current family needs but hidden truths that required careful revelation and integration into ongoing relationships. Tommy's true identity as Carlos' son and Rosa's direct great-grandson created new bonds of connection and responsibility that would enrich family relationships while honoring the memory of a young man who died serving his country before knowing about his son's existence. The inheritance Rosa had provided would ensure Tommy's future opportunities,
while maintaining family harmony through her careful legal and financial planning. The revelation transformed my own understanding of my place in the family, no longer just Michael's sister who'd married outside family traditions, but the mother of Rosa's true great-grandson, whose inheritance rights reflected his biological connection to family history and legacy. The responsibility was both humbling and empowering, recognition that I'd been entrusted with preserving connections between Tommy and his heritage while managing resources that would shape his future opportunities and understanding of family obligations. Michael's gracious acceptance of Tommy's revelation demonstrated the family values that Rosa had worked to instill and preserve through her careful planning and business success. His willingness to embrace Tommy as a true nephew, rather than feeling threatened by potential inheritance complications, showed the character that had convinced Rosa of his suitability as business successor and family leader. The morning's final surprise was a request from Rosa that Tommy be brought to Robert's office immediately, her instructions including specific provisions for his participation in a final ceremony that would complete her will reading and inheritance distribution. She'd apparently anticipated that this revelation would require Tommy's presence for proper legal acknowledgement of his inheritance rights and family connections. As Robert reached for his phone to call my neighbor who'd been watching Tommy during the will reading, I realized that Rosa's final surprise was yet to come, that her sophisticated planning had included arrangements for Tommy's dramatic arrival at precisely the moment when family members were prepared to receive him not just as a beloved child, but as Carlos's son and Rosa's direct heir, a revelation that would complete the transformation of our family's understanding of inheritance, obligation, and love. 20 minutes later, the conference room door opened with the gentle sound of Tommy's sneakers against the polished floor. Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor who'd been watching him during the will reading, guided him into the room with her usual patient smile. Tommy clutched his favorite dinosaur book against his chest, his 8-year-old eyes wide with curiosity about why he'd been summoned to such a formal adult gathering in the middle of a school day. Robert stood immediately upon Tommy's arrival, his professional demeanor softening into something approaching grandfatherly warmth as he looked at the boy who'd just been revealed as Rosa's direct biological great-grandson. The transformation in the room's atmosphere was immediate and profound, everyone's perception of Tommy shifting from beloved family connection to rightful heir and living link to Carlos's memory and Rosa's continuing legacy. Tommy's presence brought an energy that adult formality couldn't contain, his natural curiosity about the conference room's impressive furnishings and official atmosphere creating a welcome break from the emotional intensity that had followed Rosa's revelations. He approached the mahogany table with the careful respect children show in important adult spaces, clearly understanding that something significant was happening even if the details remained beyond his comprehension. Michael rose from his chair and moved toward Tommy with an expression of wonder and newfound recognition, seeing not just his sister's son but his own nephew, whose biological connection to the family had been hidden for years. The embrace that followed carried emotional weight that transcended their previous relationship, uncle and nephew discovering each other through the revelation of shared blood and family heritage that had remained secret until this moment. Jennifer watched this reunion with visible emotion, her strategic mind processing the implications of Tommy's presence while her heart responded to the genuine affection between Michael and the boy who was now officially his nephew. Her business training had prepared her for complex family dynamics in corporate succession, but nothing had equipped her for the emotional complexity of discovering hidden family connections through inheritance revelations. Mom's tears resumed as she watched Tommy accept Michael's embrace with the easy affection of a child who'd never doubted his welcome in family gatherings, but was now discovering the deeper roots of his belonging. Her grandmother's heart expanded to encompass this new understanding of Tommy's place in family history, his connection to Carlos adding layers of meaning to relationships she'd thought she already understood completely. Dad approached Tommy with the gentle formality he'd always shown toward children, but his demeanor carried new weight as he processed the reality that this boy was Carlos's son, the continuation of a family line they'd thought ended with military service in Afghanistan. His handshake with Tommy was both greeting and recognition, acknowledgement of changed status and continuing relationships. Robert had prepared special documents for Tommy's participation in the will reading, simplified versions of the legal language that would help an 8-year-old understand his inheritance and family connections without overwhelming him with complexity he couldn't yet process. Rosa's instructions had included specific provisions for age-appropriate explanation of Tommy's heritage and inheritance rights. Tommy settled into the chair beside me with the adaptability children show in new situations, his dinosaur book remaining close while he listened to Robert's carefully chosen words about Grandma Rosa's special plans for his future. The explanation was gentle but honest, acknowledging Tommy's connection to Carlos while emphasizing Rosa's love and continuing care through provisions she'd made for his education and security. The trust fund Rosa had established for Tommy was explained in terms he could understand, money set aside specifically for his college education, future opportunities and connection to family business traditions that stretched back to Rosa's early years as an immigrant entrepreneur building success through determination and hard work. Robert's explanation emphasized opportunity rather than obligation, ensuring Tommy understood he was being given choices rather than burdens.
Tommy's questions about Carlos were immediate and natural, his 8-year-old curiosity engaging with the reality of having a father he'd never known, but whose memory would now become part of his understanding of identity and family connection. Robert had prepared for these questions with photo albums and military service records that Rosa had saved, tangible evidence of Carlos's life and sacrifice that would help Tommy understand his heritage. The photographs of Carlos in military uniform created a moment of profound emotion for everyone in the room, visual confirmation of family resemblance that made Tommy's parentage undeniable even beyond Rosa's legal documentation. The similarity in facial structure and expression was striking, genetic inheritance creating connections across time and circumstance that transcended the years of separation and secrecy. Michael's examination of the photographs revealed emotions he'd kept private about Carlos's death, grief and pride mixing as he processed the reality that his older cousin lived on through Tommy's presence and future potential. The military service records documented Carlos's achievements and sacrifice, providing context for understanding the man whose son had been raised without knowledge of his father's identity or family connections. Jennifer's strategic mind was already engaging with possibilities for Tommy's future involvement in family business operations, educational pathways that could prepare him for eventual participation in restaurant management, while honoring both Carlos's memory and Rosa's intentions for continuing family legacy. Her business training suggested approaches that would integrate Tommy's inheritance with ongoing operations while respecting his youth and need for normal childhood development. Tommy's absorption of this information was remarkably mature for his age, his questions thoughtful and his acceptance of new family connections, graceful in the way children often handle major changes that adults find overwhelming. His immediate embrace of Michael as his true uncle demonstrated the resilience children show when love and security remain constant even as circumstances shift around them. Rosa's final surprise was revealed through a sealed letter addressed specifically to Tommy, written in her careful handwriting but using vocabulary and concepts appropriate for a child's understanding. Robert read the letter aloud, Rosa's voice emerging through words chosen to communicate across the gap between her adult world and Tommy's childhood perspective while honoring their special relationship. The letter revealed that Rosa had been watching Tommy's development with the particular attention great-grandmothers reserve for beloved descendants, noting his kindness to other children, his curiosity about how things work, his responsible attitude toward school assignments and household chores. Her observations demonstrated the depth of her connection to Tommy despite the secrecy surrounding his parentage. Rosa's message to Tommy emphasized that inheritance meant more than money or property but included responsibility for continuing family values of hard work, community service and care for people who needed help. Her words transformed abstract concepts of legacy into concrete actions an 8-year-old could understand and eventually implement as he matured into greater awareness of family obligations and opportunities. The letter included specific mention of Rosa's hope that Tommy would learn about his Mexican heritage and cultural traditions, perhaps through Spanish language study and exploration of family history that connected him to generations of ancestors who'd faced challenges with courage and determination. Her vision for Tommy's future encompassed both American opportunities and cultural preservation. Tommy's response to Rosa's letter was characteristically direct, his questions focusing on practical matters like whether he could visit Carlos's grave and whether the restaurants would still serve his favorite enchiladas now that Rosa was gone. His 8-year-old priorities remained unchanged even as adult understanding of inheritance and obligation swirled around him. Michael's assurance that Tommy could visit Carlos's grave whenever he wanted created another moment of emotional connection, uncle and nephew bonding over shared grief for a man whose memory would now unite them in ways that transcended their previous relationship. The visit would become a family tradition, annual remembrance that honored Carlos while celebrating Tommy's continuing presence.
The practical arrangements for Tommy's trust fund required signatures and legal acknowledgments that he was too young to provide independently, creating temporary guardianship provisions that would allow me to manage his inheritance with professional oversight until he reached majority age. Rosa's planning had anticipated these administrative requirements, while ensuring Tommy's interests remained protected throughout his minority. Robert explained the educational provisions Rosa had created within Tommy's trust, funding that would support not just college tuition but enrichment opportunities like travel, language study and cultural exploration that would broaden his understanding of family heritage and personal possibilities. The trust was designed to grow over time, providing increasing resources as Tommy matured into greater awareness of his inheritance and its implications. The restaurant business provisions that affected Tommy were carefully structured to provide future opportunities without creating immediate obligations, allowing him to learn about family enterprises gradually while maintaining freedom to pursue his own interests and career directions. Rosa's planning balanced family tradition with individual choice, ensuring Tommy's inheritance enhanced rather than constrained his future possibilities. Tommy's immediate practical question about whether his inheritance meant he was rich now created gentle laughter that broke some of the emotional tension that had accumulated during the formal legal proceedings. Robert's explanation that trust funds worked differently from regular money helped Tommy understand that his inheritance was an investment in his future rather than immediate spending money. The family's processing of Tommy's true identity and inheritance continued throughout the afternoon as practical arrangements were discussed, and emotional adjustments were made to accommodate new understanding of relationships and obligations. Tommy's presence transformed abstract legal provisions into concrete family connections that would shape everyone's interactions and expectations going forward. Michael's embrace of his role as Tommy's true uncle created immediate changes in their relationship, conversations about family business and traditions taking on new weight as uncle and nephew discovered shared heritage and continuing connections. The mentorship that had been casual before would now become intentional, Tommy learning about family values and business principles through example and experience. Jennifer's strategic planning for family business operations now included long-term considerations for Tommy's potential involvement, educational pathways and summer job opportunities that would introduce him gradually to restaurant operations while allowing him to develop his own interests and capabilities. Her business training provided frameworks for integrating Tommy's inheritance with ongoing family enterprises. The revelation about Tommy's parentage had transformed everyone's understanding of family dynamics and inheritance distribution. Rosa's careful planning ensuring that hidden truths were revealed at precisely the right moment to maximize positive impact while minimizing potential conflicts or resentments. Her timing had been masterful, allowing family members to process Michael's inheritance before discovering Tommy's additional claims. Mom's role as grandmother was enriched through Tommy's true family status, her emotional investment in his development now supported by official recognition of his place in family history and inheritance rights. Her relationship with Tommy had always been loving, but now it carried additional weight of family obligation and cultural transmission. Dad's mentorship of Tommy would continue with new understanding of the boy's heritage and connection to Carlos, military service and sacrifice becoming part of family stories that shaped Tommy's understanding of duty, honor, and personal responsibility. The photographs and service records would become treasured family artifacts that connected Tommy to his father's memory and achievements. The afternoon concluded with arrangements for ongoing communication and coordination among family members as they adjusted to new understanding of relationships and inheritance obligations. Rosa's planning had created structures for continued family unity while accommodating the revelations that had transformed everyone's perception of Tommy's place in family history and future. Tommy's departure from the conference room was accompanied by promises of special uncle-nephew activities with Michael, grandmother privileges with Mom, and continuing exploration of his heritage through family stories and cultural traditions. His 8-year-old adaptability had carried him through major revelations with grace that impressed all the adults who were still processing their own emotional adjustments. The drive home was filled with Tommy's questions about Carlos, Rosa, and his new understanding of family connections, his curiosity engaging with revelations that would shape his identity and self-understanding as he matured into greater awareness of inheritance rights and family obligations. His excitement about having a real uncle and learning about his father created foundation for relationships that would enrich his entire life. That evening, as Tommy fell asleep clutching both his dinosaur book and a photograph of Carlos in military uniform, I reflected on Rosa's sophisticated planning and her gift of family connections that had been preserved through years of secrecy until the perfect moment for revelation. Her love for Tommy had been expressed through legal provisions and inheritance rights that would shape his future while honoring his father's memory and sacrifice. The transformation of our family's understanding had been complete and profound, Rosa's final surprise creating bonds of relationship and responsibility that would influence everyone's interactions and expectations for generations to come. Tommy's inheritance was more than money or property, it was connection to heritage, family values, and continuing legacy that Rosa had preserved and protected through careful planning and perfect timing. Michael's acceptance of Tommy as his true nephew rather than threatening competition demonstrated the family values Rosa had worked to instill and preserve, his generous spirit ensuring that inheritance created opportunity rather than conflict. The restaurants would continue operating under family control while Tommy's trust provided security and educational opportunity that honored both Carlos's sacrifice and Rosa's continuing love. The will reading that had begun with comfortable expectations had become a journey of revelation and discovery, family secrets transformed into family bonds through Rosa's masterful timing and comprehensive planning. Tommy's arrival had shocked everyone, but his integration into family understanding had been seamless, love and acceptance overcoming surprise to create stronger connections and richer relationships. In the months that followed, Tommy's education would include Spanish language study and cultural exploration that connected him to his Mexican heritage while preparing him for American opportunities. His trust fund would grow under professional management while family mentorship prepared him gradually for eventual understanding of business operations and community responsibilities that came with inheritance and family legacy. Rosa Elena Rodriguez had achieved her final goal through perfect planning and timing, revealing family truths that strengthened rather than divided, creating inheritance structures that honored everyone's contributions while ensuring Tommy received his rightful heritage as Carlos's son and her direct great-grandson. Her love had been expressed through legal documents and financial provisions, but more importantly through preservation of family connections that would enrich Tommy's entire life while honoring his father's memory and sacrifice. The story that began with routine will reading had become family transformation, ordinary inheritance becoming extraordinary revelation of hidden connections and preserved love. Tommy's shocked arrival had indeed surprised everyone, but the surprise had brought joy rather than conflict, unity rather than division, as Rosa had planned and hoped through her careful preparation and perfect timing. 6 months after Rosa's will reading, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Rosa's kitchen on Central Avenue, casting warm light across tables where regulars gathered for their daily coffee and conversation. The restaurant hummed with its familiar rhythm of breakfast service, but everything felt different now, charged with new meaning and deeper purpose that went beyond simple business operations. Tommy sat at his usual corner table, homework spread across the surface while he worked on a Spanish vocabulary assignment that would have made Rosa proud. His pencil moved carefully across the page, forming letters that connected him to cultural heritage he was just beginning to understand. The trust fund Rosa had established was already paying for language tutoring, connecting Tommy to roots that had been severed by years of secrecy but were now being carefully cultivated. Michael moved through the dining room with the confidence of someone who truly belonged, greeting longtime customers by name while checking on food quality and service standards that Rosa had established decades earlier. His ownership was official now, legal documents filed and business licenses transferred, but the real transition had been emotional, accepting responsibility for preserving traditions while adapting to changing circumstances and community needs. Jennifer's business improvements were subtle but effective, new point-of-sale systems that streamlined operations while maintaining the personal touch that distinguished Rosa's restaurants from corporate competitors. Her strategic vision was being implemented gradually, respecting established customs while introducing efficiencies that would ensure long-term profitability and growth potential. The photograph of Carlos in military uniform held a place of honor near the cash register, a memorial that acknowledged his sacrifice while celebrating Tommy's continuing presence as his living legacy. Customers who'd known Rosa often paused to look at the image, sharing memories of her pride in her grandson's service and her quiet grief over his loss in Afghanistan before anyone knew about Tommy's existence. Tommy's relationship with the restaurant had evolved beyond simple family connection into genuine understanding of business operations and community service. His after-school hours were spent observing kitchen procedures, learning food safety protocols, and understanding customer service principles that would serve him well regardless of his eventual career choices. Rosa's planning had created opportunities rather than obligations, allowing Tommy to explore family traditions while maintaining freedom to pursue his own interests. The trust fund's educational provisions had already begun supporting enrichment activities that broadened Tommy's understanding of both Mexican culture and American opportunities. Weekend visits to museums and cultural centers provided context for family history, while language classes connected him to traditions that immigration and assimilation had interrupted but not destroyed. Michael's mentorship of Tommy had deepened into genuine uncle-nephew bonding, Saturday morning fishing trips and evening homework sessions creating relationship foundations that would last throughout their lives. The revelation of Tommy's true parentage had transformed casual affection into intentional investment, Michael understanding that his role included preserving Carlos's memory while supporting Tommy's development into his own person. Mom's grandmother role had been enriched through official recognition of Tommy's family status, her emotional investment validated through legal acknowledgement of relationships that love had already established. Her photo albums now included Carlos's military service alongside Tommy's school achievements, visual documentation of family connections that spanned generations and honored both sacrifice and continuing hope. Dad's stories about Rosa's early business struggles had become bedtime narratives that taught Tommy about perseverance and determination while connecting him to family history that explained his inheritance and its underlying values. The business books Rosa had left to Dad were being used to teach Tommy about entrepreneurship and financial responsibility, practical education that would serve him regardless of his future career directions. The community impact of Rosa's charitable bequests was becoming visible throughout Phoenix. Immigrant services expanded and food bank operations improved through funding that honored her memory while addressing needs she'd understood from personal experience. The donations were creating lasting change rather than temporary relief, strategic investments in community development that reflected Rosa's sophisticated understanding of social responsibility. Tommy's Spanish language progress was remarkable for a child who'd begun learning his heritage language at age 8, his natural facility suggesting genetic connection to bilingual traditions that had been interrupted but not lost. His conversations with elderly customers who remembered Rosa were conducted increasingly in Spanish, cultural bridges being rebuilt through language acquisition and intergenerational communication. The restaurant's community role had expanded under Michael's ownership, hosting cultural events and fundraisers that reflected Rosa's vision of business as community service, rather than purely profit-driven enterprise. The dining room regularly welcomed local organizations and cultural groups, meeting space provided freely to support causes that aligned with family values and community development. Jennifer's strategic planning included provisions for Tommy's eventual involvement in business operations, summer job opportunities and management training that would prepare him gradually for potential family business participation while ensuring he understood all career options remained open.
Her approach balanced family tradition with individual choice, creating pathways rather than predetermined destinations. The Military Memorial Fund established in Carlos's honor provided scholarships for children of service members, transforming personal grief into community support that honored sacrifice while creating opportunities for families facing similar challenges. Tommy's participation in award ceremonies connected him to his father's legacy while demonstrating the continuing impact of service and dedication. Tommy's understanding of his inheritance had matured significantly during the 6 months since Rose's revelation, his 8-year-old perspective evolving into more sophisticated awareness of opportunity and responsibility. His questions about trust fund management and family business operations showed developing financial literacy that would serve him well as he assumed greater control over his inheritance. The family dynamics that had been transformed through Rose's will reading continued evolving as everyone adjusted to new understanding of relationships and obligations. Tommy's presence at family gatherings carried additional weight now, his opinion solicited and his preferences considered in ways that reflected his official status as family heir and continuing connection to Carlos's memory. Michael's success as business owner was evident in improved financial performance and expanded community engagement, his leadership style combining Rose's customer service focus with modern management techniques that Jennifer's training had introduced. The restaurants were thriving under family ownership while maintaining the cultural authenticity and personal attention that had always distinguished their operations. The educational trust provisions were supporting not just Tommy's formal schooling but cultural education that connected him to broader Latino community traditions and celebrations. His participation in Dia de los Muertos observances and other cultural events was creating social connections that would enrich his understanding of heritage and identity throughout his life. Tommy's relationship with Mrs. Henderson had deepened through shared
knowledge of family secrets, the elderly neighbor who'd watched him during the will reading, becoming an honorary grandmother who understood his unique position as inheritor of both opportunity and obligation. Her perspective as longtime Phoenix resident provided historical context for understanding how Rose's immigrant experience had shaped family success. The restaurant's reputation for authentic Mexican cuisine had been enhanced rather than diminished through the ownership transition, longtime customers expressing satisfaction that family control would preserve recipes and preparation techniques that had been perfected over decades of operation. Michael's respect for established traditions created continuity that honored Rose's legacy while allowing for gradual improvement and adaptation. Jennifer's business background had proven invaluable during the transition period, her strategic planning helping navigate regulatory requirements and tax implications while ensuring that day-to-day operations remained smooth and profitable. Her integration into family business operations had been seamless, her contributions welcomed and her expertise utilized effectively. Tommy's questions about Carlos had evolved from simple curiosity to genuine desire to understand his father's character and values. Conversations with family members revealing aspects of Carlos's personality that would help Tommy develop his own identity while honoring his father's memory. The military service records had become treasured family documents that provided concrete connection to heroism and sacrifice. The trust fund's growth under professional management was exceeding projections, conservative investment strategies producing steady returns that would ensure Tommy's educational opportunities and future security while preserving capital for long-term wealth building. Rose's financial planning was proving as sophisticated as her business management, creating sustainable prosperity that would benefit multiple generations. Michael's leadership of the restaurant chain had attracted attention from local business organizations and cultural groups, recognition that reflected both personal achievement and continuation of Rose's community legacy. His speeches about family business traditions and immigrant entrepreneurship honored Rose's memory while inspiring other families to pursue their own success stories. Tommy's academic performance had improved significantly since learning about his heritage and inheritance. His sense of identity strengthened through understanding of family history and cultural connections. His teachers noted increased confidence and engagement, changes that reflected internal transformation produced by secure family relationships and clear future opportunities. The charitable foundation established through Rosa's will continued supporting immigrant services and community development annual distributions, creating ongoing impact that honored her memory while addressing needs she'd understood from personal experience. The foundation's work was creating lasting change in Phoenix's Latino community, educational and economic opportunities that would benefit families for generations. Tommy's summer camp experiences now included cultural immersion programs that connected him to Mexican traditions and Spanish language development, educational opportunities that Rosa's trust fund supported as investments in cultural preservation and identity formation. His enthusiasm for these programs reflected natural curiosity about heritage that had been hidden but never lost. The family business's financial success under Michael's leadership was creating opportunities for expansion and diversification, new revenue streams that would ensure long-term sustainability while providing additional career paths for Tommy as he matured into greater awareness of business operations and management responsibilities. The restaurants were becoming the foundation for broader family enterprises that would support multiple generations. Jennifer's consulting work had evolved to focus specifically on family business transitions and succession planning, her experience with Rosa's inheritance informing professional services that helped other families navigate similar challenges. Her expertise was being shared with Latino business organizations throughout the Southwest, contributing to broader community economic development. Tommy's relationship with his extended family had deepened through regular gatherings and shared activities that reinforced family bonds while creating new memories and traditions. His cousins on both sides of the family had embraced his true identity, childhood relationships strengthened through honest communication about family history and shared heritage. The military honor guard ceremony that had been organized for Carlos's memorial service provided Tommy with powerful connection to his father's sacrifice and the broader military community that honored fallen heroes. His participation in the ceremony was both emotionally challenging and deeply meaningful, creating understanding of service and dedication that would influence his own values and life choices. Michael's success in preserving Rosa's business legacy while adapting to contemporary market conditions demonstrated the leadership qualities that had convinced Rosa of his suitability as family business successor. His ability to balance tradition with innovation was creating sustainable growth that honored the past while embracing future opportunities and challenges. The community recognition that Rosa's restaurants received under Michael's ownership reflected both business excellence and cultural contribution, awards and designations that acknowledged the family's role in preserving Mexican culinary traditions while serving broader community needs. The restaurants had become cultural institutions that provided more than food, offering connection to heritage and tradition that enriched Phoenix's multicultural landscape. Tommy's 8th birthday celebration at the restaurant brought together all the family relationships that had been transformed through Rosa's revelations, uncle and nephew, grandparents, and great-grandson, creating new traditions while honoring established customs. The party was both personal milestone and family celebration, acknowledgement of Tommy's growth and continuing importance to everyone who loved him. The trust fund provisions for Tommy's future education were being implemented through careful planning and professional guidance, investment strategies, and educational consultants, ensuring that Rosa's vision for Tommy's development would be realized through appropriate opportunities and support systems. His future was secure not just financially but academically and culturally, foundation for success in whatever career path he eventually chose. As the sun set over Phoenix on that autumn evening, 6 months after the will reading, Tommy sat in Rosa's kitchen working on homework while the dinner service continued around him, absorbed in assignments that connected him to both academic achievement and cultural heritage. The restaurant hummed with familiar sounds and aromas, continuity that honored Rosa's memory while embracing the future she had carefully planned and protected. The family business was thriving under Michael's ownership, the trust fund was growing under professional management, and Tommy was developing into the young man Rosa had envisioned, confident in his identity and secure in his family relationships. Her legacy lived on not just in legal documents and financial accounts, but in daily operations and personal relationships that reflected her values and vision. The shocking revelations of that spring morning had transformed into comfortable acceptance and strengthened family bonds, Rosa's perfect timing and comprehensive planning creating unity rather than division, opportunity rather than obligation. Tommy's arrival at the will reading had indeed shocked everyone, but the shock had brought joy and connection rather than conflict, exactly as Rosa had hoped and planned through her sophisticated understanding of family dynamics and perfect timing. 2 years had passed since that transformative morning in Robert Chen's conference room, and the autumn air in Phoenix carried the comfortable warmth that made October the city's most perfect month. Tommy, now 10 years old, stood confidently at the podium in the community center where Rosa's charitable foundation was hosting its annual scholarship ceremony, his voice clear and steady as he addressed an audience that included immigration advocates, business leaders, and families whose children would benefit from educational opportunities Rosa had envisioned. The scholarship recipients sat in the front rows, their faces reflecting the same mixture of hope and determination that had characterized Rosa's own journey from food cart vendor to successful restaurant owner. Tommy's Spanish had become fluent enough for him to deliver portions of his speech in both languages, cultural bridges rebuilt through education and practice that connected him authentically to heritage he was now proud to claim and share. Michael watched from the back of the room with the satisfaction of someone whose stewardship had exceeded all expectations. The restaurant chain now expanded to 5 locations throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area while maintaining the authentic flavors and personal service that had distinguished Rosa's original establishments. His success as a business owner had been validated through community recognition and financial growth, but more importantly, through preservation of family values and cultural traditions that Rosa had worked a lifetime to establish. Jennifer's role as business operations manager had evolved into community leadership, her strategic planning extending beyond restaurant management to include cultural event coordination and educational program development that served Phoenix's growing Latino population. Her integration into the family had been complete and natural, her contributions welcomed, and her vision aligned with values that honored Rosa's memory while addressing contemporary community needs. The trust fund that Rosa had established for Tommy had grown substantially under careful professional management, conservative investment strategies, producing returns that exceeded projections while preserving capital for long-term educational and personal development. The fund now supported not just Tommy's individual needs, but also the scholarship program that would help other children from immigrant families access educational opportunities their parents had dreamed of providing. Tommy's academic performance had consistently placed him among the top students in his grade, his confidence and focus strengthened through secure family relationships and clear understanding of his cultural identity and family history. His teachers regularly commented on his maturity and leadership qualities, characteristics that reflected the values Rosa had hoped would develop through proper nurturing and educational support. The Military Memorial Fund, established in Carlos's honor, had become a significant source of support for military families throughout Arizona, annual distributions, providing scholarships, emergency assistance, and counseling services that honored sacrifice while supporting survivors who faced ongoing challenges. Tommy's participation in memorial ceremonies had connected him deeply to his father's legacy and the broader military community that valued service above personal comfort. Mom's role as family historian had expanded to include documentation of Rosa's business legacy and its community impact, oral history projects, and photographic archives that preserved memory while inspiring future generations of entrepreneurs and community leaders. Her relationship with Tommy had deepened through shared exploration of family stories and cultural traditions that connected past achievements to future possibilities. Dad's retirement had been comfortable and meaningful, his experience and knowledge utilized as consultant for family business operations, while his time was increasingly devoted to
mentoring other Latino business owners who sought guidance about expansion, community engagement, and succession planning. His relationship with Tommy included regular fishing trips and practical education about financial responsibility and ethical business practices. The community center, where Tommy was delivering his scholarship speech, had been renovated through Rosa's charitable bequests, modernized facilities, now serving as headquarters for multiple organizations that supported immigrant integration, cultural preservation, and economic development throughout Phoenix's diverse neighborhoods. The center's programs provided services that Rosa had needed during her own early years in America, assistance that was now available to current immigrants facing similar challenges. Tommy's speech emphasized education as the foundation for both individual success and community contribution, themes that echoed Rosa's own beliefs about the responsibilities that came with opportunity and achievement. His words carried conviction that impressed adults who had initially been charmed by his youth but were now genuinely moved by his understanding of legacy and obligation. The scholarship recipients represented diverse backgrounds and career aspirations, students whose dreams ranged from medical school to culinary arts, from engineering to social work. Rosa's vision had encompassed this diversity, understanding that community strength came from individuals who developed their unique talents while maintaining connection to cultural values and family traditions. Michael's introduction of Tommy at the ceremony had acknowledged both his nephew's personal growth and his emerging role as family legacy bearer, recognition that was both proud and realistic about the responsibilities Tommy would eventually assume. The family business was thriving, but its long-term success would depend on continued leadership that understood both entrepreneurial innovation and cultural authenticity. Jennifer's coordination of the scholarship program reflected her understanding that business success created opportunities for community investment, strategic philanthropy that built goodwill while addressing genuine social needs. Her approach balanced practical impact measurement with recognition of intangible benefits that came from supporting educational opportunity and cultural preservation. The restaurant locations had become gathering places for Phoenix's Latino community, spaces where cultural events, business meetings, and family celebrations created social connections that strengthened community bonds while supporting economic development. Michael's leadership had transformed individual business success into broader community contribution that honored Rosa's vision of entrepreneurship as service. Tommy's friendships at school included children from diverse backgrounds, relationships that reflected Phoenix's multicultural character while grounding him in American social traditions. His bilingual capabilities and cultural knowledge had made him a bridge between communities, natural leadership that suggested future potential for broader social impact and community service. The trust fund's educational provisions were supporting not just formal schooling but enrichment experiences that broadened Tommy's understanding of both American opportunity and global perspectives. Summer programs included cultural immersion in Mexico, language study, and leadership development that would prepare him for whatever career path he eventually chose to pursue. Tommy's relationship with Miss Henderson had evolved into genuine friendship between generations, the elderly neighbor serving as honorary grandmother who provided historical perspective about Phoenix's development while sharing memories of Rosa's community involvement and business growth. Their conversations connected Tommy to neighborhood history while reinforcing lessons about persistence and community contribution. The Foundation's annual report documented impacts that exceeded Rosa's most optimistic projections: educational scholarships, community development grants, and cultural preservation projects, creating lasting change throughout Arizona's immigrant communities. The Foundation had become a model for other family-based philanthropic efforts, strategic giving that honored memory while addressing contemporary needs. Michael's leadership of the Phoenix Latino Business Association reflected recognition of his success and community commitment positions that provided platforms for advocating policies and programs that supported immigrant entrepreneurship and cultural preservation. His influence extended beyond family business operations to include broader economic development and social justice initiatives. Tommy's participation in Dia de los Muertos celebrations had become annual tradition that connected him to extended Latino community while honoring family members who had died, including Rosa and Carlos. His understanding of these cultural observances had deepened through education and experience, traditions that now felt natural rather than imposed or artificial. The restaurant chain's reputation for authentic cuisine and community service had attracted national attention, food critics and business publications recognizing Michael's achievement in expanding operations while maintaining quality and cultural integrity. The success validated Rosa's original vision while demonstrating that traditional values and modern business practices could be successfully integrated. Jennifer's consulting work with other family businesses had developed into specialized expertise in Latino enterprise development services that helped other families navigate cultural transitions while building sustainable economic success. Her experience with Rosa's inheritance had provided insights that benefited broader community development efforts throughout the Southwest. Tommy's understanding of his inheritance had matured beyond simple financial awareness to include recognition of social responsibility and cultural obligation, understanding that Rosa's gift included expectations about community contribution and family legacy preservation. His maturity impressed adults who worked with him on foundation projects and community events. The military memorial services that Tommy attended regularly had connected him to a network of military families and veterans organizations, relationships that honored Carlos's sacrifice while providing Tommy with role models who demonstrated service, discipline, and dedication to causes larger than personal interest. His participation was both meaningful and educational, exposure to values that would influence his character development. Michael's success in balancing business growth with community service had created a model that other Latino entrepreneurs sought to emulate. Speaking engagements and consulting opportunities that shared Rosa's approaches to customer service, employee relations, and cultural preservation within competitive market environments. His influence was expanding beyond Phoenix to include regional and national Latino business development. Tommy's academic interests had begun focusing on subjects that could support either business management or community service careers, mathematics and social studies courses that provided foundation for future specialization while maintaining breadth that would support whatever direction his interests eventually took. His teachers noted his particular strength in leadership and communication skills. The trust fund's provisions for Tommy's college education were being supplemented by scholarship opportunities he was earning through academic achievement and community service, external recognition that validated Rosa's confidence in his potential while providing additional resources for advanced education and professional development. Tommy's relationship with his extended family had become the center of increasingly elaborate holiday celebrations and family gatherings, occasions that brought together relatives from both sides of the family while creating new traditions that honored both Mexican and American cultural elements. His presence united family members who had previously maintained more distant relationships. The community impact of Rosa's charitable planning was visible throughout Phoenix in improved services, expanded programs, and enhanced facilities that served immigrant families and supported cultural preservation. Her strategic philanthropy had created lasting change rather than temporary assistance, investments in community infrastructure that would benefit future generations. Michael's expansion of restaurant operations into catering and food service had created additional employment opportunities for Latino workers while extending family business influence into corporate and institutional markets. The growth strategy honored Rosa's entrepreneurial vision while adapting to contemporary market opportunities and community needs. Jennifer's role in family business operations had evolved to include succession planning that would eventually incorporate Tommy's interests and capabilities, long-term strategic thinking that balanced family legacy with business sustainability and market adaptation. Her planning ensured that Rosa's vision would continue evolving while maintaining core values and community commitments. As Tommy concluded his scholarship speech, to enthusiastic applause from an audience that included scholarship recipients, their families, community leaders, and business supporters, the transformation that had begun with Rosa's surprising will reading was complete. The shy 8-year-old, who had been summoned unexpectedly to a lawyer's office, had become a confident 10-year-old community leader whose presence honored his father's memory while fulfilling his great-grandmother's vision. The evening reception that followed the ceremony brought together all the relationships that had been strengthened and created through Rosa's careful planning, family members, and community partners, celebrating achievements that honored the past while supporting future opportunity and growth. The gathering was both memorial and anticipation, recognition of Rosa's legacy and confidence in continuing development. Tommy moved through the reception with natural ease, comfortable conversations with adults who had known Rosa, scholarship recipients who would benefit from her planning, and family members who had watched him grow into his role as legacy bearer and community contributor. His confidence was genuine rather than artificial, grounded in secure relationships and clear understanding of his identity and obligations. The Foundation's board meeting that concluded the evening addressed plans for expanding scholarship programs, community development initiatives, and cultural preservation projects that would extend Rosa's impact while adapting to changing needs and opportunities. Tommy's participation in planning discussions demonstrated maturity that impressed experienced community leaders. As the family drove home through Phoenix streets that reflected the city's continuing growth and diversification, Tommy sat quietly in the backseat processing the evening's experiences while planning homework assignments that connected academic requirements to community involvement and cultural exploration. His integration of educational achievement with social responsibility reflected values that Rosa had hoped to instill through her careful planning and comprehensive inheritance provisions. The restaurant locations they passed displayed signs indicating family ownership and community commitment, businesses that had grown beyond simple commercial enterprises to become cultural institutions that preserve traditions while adapting to contemporary needs and opportunities. Michael's leadership had fulfilled Rosa's vision while exceeding her most optimistic projections about family business success and community impact. The trust fund statements that arrived monthly documented continuing growth and strategic distributions that supported Tommy's development while funding community programs that honored Rosa's memory and values. The financial success was meaningful not just for individual security but for broader community contribution that created lasting change and opportunity. Tommy's future remained open to multiple possibilities, but his foundation was solid, and his understanding of opportunity and obligation was clear. Rosa's gift had been more than money or property, it had been identity, purpose, and connection to heritage and community that would guide his decisions and influence his contributions, regardless of whatever career path he eventually chose. The shocking revelation that had transformed a routine will reading into family transformation had created exactly the outcomes Rosa had envisioned through her careful planning and perfect timing. Tommy's unexpected arrival at the lawyer's office had indeed shocked everyone, but the surprise had strengthened rather than divided the family, creating bonds of love and responsibility that honored both Carlos's sacrifice and Rosa's lifetime of achievement and community service. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.